Okay, let's begin the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you especially to John, obviously, for coming out tonight.
Is there anyone in the balcony who wants to sit in the front row? There are 3 seats. There are 3 seats here. I'm not going to bother you. I am, probably. You made the right decision. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
When they were introducing you, all that stuff that I didn't know about you, but you do a lot of different things. You write,
Yes.
You act, you are funny, you are sad, you are... but, so I wonder...
That is basically my career. I started out as a writer. I accidentally went on television because of The Daily Show and Apple. I then became, that's wonderful, please come, please, that's right. Oh, this is the whole point. We're all hurtling towards death here. Life is short. Grab those front row seats when you can. Why be shy? That's the sad portion of my career.
I see, okay.
I write, I acted, and continue to a little bit, and then I'm funny, and then sad. It's how life goes.
But you seem to cobble together a lot of things,
Yeah.
sort of the way a lot of Mainers, rake clams, and then they make wreaths in the winter, and then they work at LL Bean at Christmas. So I wondered if that's
There could
why
not
you
be
came,
a more apt comparison
I wondered if that's why you came to Maine, because
between
you thought
me
you
as
fit in, or
as a dilettante masshole from Brookline, Massachusetts.
so is that why you came to Maine, or was there another reason you ended up in Maine?
Well, no, I much as I was kidnapped by television, I didn't intend to go on television. I never intended to end up here. My wife, who is a whole human being in her own right, grew up coming to Maine. Her grandmother lived in the near Ellsworth in Surrey, Maine. And woohoo, indeed, yeah. And she would visit her grandmother every summer and loves Maine more than any other place or person on earth. And once we got married, I was informed that I would visit here and eventually die here. And the joke's on her, because I think I love it even more than she does. And I'm not dead yet. So whatever she had planned hasn't worked out. But yeah, no, we spent a winter, and so we spend, my wife teaches high school, and I'm marginally self-employed. Yeah, you're wooing for high school, and boo self-employment. But so we can spend, a fair chunk of the year here, and we got a home in this town in coastal Maine, north of here, about 10 years ago, when there were homes for sale. And it wasn't a totally monstrous thing to do, to buy one that you would only occupy part of the year. I feel really bad about it now, but sorry. But in any case, we mostly would spend the summers here, but we've spent lots and lots of time over the holidays here, and we spend a whole winter here. And it had always been my wife's dream to spend a winter here. And as soon as that was over, she said, I'm never going back. When all I could do was let's have more winter, please. I mean, every night I would just throw open the window and stare into the snow. There was snow that winter. Maybe there'll be some in the future. But just stare out into the dark woods and the snow and just contemplate the absolute abyss of the end of my being. And I was like, it's a great way to retire.
So since you've had a house in Maine, what's the most exciting thing that's happened to you there? Or the saddest, I don't know.
You're really making a presumption about my range of emotion. So, I wrote about it in this book, Vacation Land, which is for sale out there. And I'll be signing books after if you want to get yours signed or buy one or whatever you want to do. But we moved to this little town And we didn't know quite what we were in for. Every town has its own unique sort of life and rhythms to it. And we were understandably on the outside of this town's life, in part because we're from away and we're monsters, and in part because this town has a boat building history to it. So a lot of the life of the town, or a certain part of the town, is on the water, and we weren't. And there was this opportunity that came up. There was going to be an auction at the Deer Isle High School, and the thing that they were auctioning off was a Jimmy Steele peapod. Now, if you don't know, a peapod is a kind of rowboat that is pointed at both ends. It kind of looks like a peapod. And it's a very traditional old Maine rowboat, because it would be, before there were a lot of motors around, lobstermen would use the peapod because you could get into very shallow waters with it, and they were very stable, and you could, whatever. Who cares? I just forgot, I'm in Maine, of course you care. Anyway, so that's what a peapod is, and Jimmy Steele is the name of the cantankerous old dead guy who used to build them in this town. And people were very excited because he had passed away not too long before. He had only made a certain number of them, and they were auctioning it off. And a friend of ours said, please go to this auction. I can't go because I'm busy, but I just want to see what happens with this boat because this is amazing. And she was like, if you want to bid on the boat for me, I'm willing to go up to $1,000, but I'll never get it because it'll go for much more. And we're like, sure, we'll go and place a bid for you. So we go out there, and it's pretty obvious from the start. There's a whole bunch of people there, and they're only there for this peapod because the only other things that are for auction are some broken skis and like a can of old nickels. Like, there's nothing else. And indeed, it's the first item up for auction, and the guy goes, well, this is a Jimmy Steele peapod. This is the 107th that he ever built. Blah, 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 and he's like, and the reserve, the opening minimum bid is $3,500. And I had said to my wife, like, we're not gonna spend $3,500 on this rowboat, but she was clearly in love with it the moment she saw it. And I said, and obviously our friend, our friend's bid is nothing, but since everyone's here to bid on it, if you'd like to make the first bid, like that would be fun, right? Because then it'll go up from there, and we'll watch it sail off into the sunset, and we'll know that we had a small hand in launching this boat to its new and rightful owners. And so she's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm like, it'll be fun, do it. So the guy starts the auction going, and he's like, well, the Jimmy Steele peapod, number 107 in the line that he made, blah, 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 and we're going to start the bidding. Who'll give me $3,500? And no one's bidding. And I'm like, oh, well, they're all just being reticent, right? New England. Can't show excitement about anything. I'm giving these dagger eyes to my wife, like, go do the thing that we talked about, $3,500. She's like, I don't want to. I'm like, please. Finally, she goes, oh, $3,500. All right, $3,500. Who'll give me $3,600? Who'll give me $3,600? Who'll give me $3,600? No one would. I don't want you to think that $3,500 means nothing to me. I was in a fucking dead panic at this point. No one would bid $3,600. And the auctioneer was getting embarrassed, and finally he turned to someone to someone he knew in the audience, and he's like, Dan, please bid. And Dan's like, I've already got a Jimmy Steele peapod. What were they all doing there? Dan finally was like, all right, $3,600. And the guy goes, all right, I have $3,600. Who'll give me $3,700? All of a sudden, my wife's like, $3,700! Because she knew she would win. And indeed, she did. No one else bid. And I was like, what has happened? Why are we just came here to observe local custom, like the monsters from away that we are, and now we own this piece of history. And as soon as the auction ended, all these people who had nothing to say when it was bidding time would walk up to my wife and just say, Jimmy Steel Peapod for $3,700. What a bargain. Good for you. And it came with a trailer, which I had to learn how to drive. And as we trailed this Peapod through our lives for the coming weeks, people would see it and they would like, that's that Jimmy Steel Peapod. News got all over the peninsula. You get that for $3,700? What a bargain. Good for you. It just happened again and again and again. And one time I was in the post office and Chip was there. You know Chip. And he goes, did you buy that Jimmy Steel Peapod for $3,700? I'm like, yeah, give it to me. What are you going to say? He's like, that's a bargain. Good for you. I'm like, okay, are we done? What's going on? He goes, no, there's someone I'd like you to meet. The post office is very small. I don't know where this ghost of a person came from. All of a sudden there was another person amidst the mailboxes. I don't know where she emerged from, materialized out of thin air. Elderly woman, very handsome elderly woman. He goes, this is Pam, Jimmy Steele's widow. And he's like, Pam, John and his wife just bought that Peapod. She goes, I wanted to see the person who bought Jimmy's Peapod for $3,700. Good for you. And I thought we were going to be murdered. I thought this was some Midsommar shit that sorry to swear, everyone, but that this was some ritual where every year they would trot out the Peapod and trick some visitors from away into buying it and then fatten them up with compliments, make them feel like they're part of the town, and then at the end of the summer at the Blue Hill Fair, they'd be burned alive. But that didn't happen. It was very exciting.
But the widow did not tell you got a bargain.
No, she didn't. But the look in her eyes when she said, good for you. I don't tolerate ambiguity very well. But in that way, Maine has been very therapeutic for me. You don't know how people feel about you most of the time. And it's like they can be really cold to you for a long time, and then they're rescuing you from. I've not been rescued. I don't know. I don't want to. Look, for 3 summers, the postmaster wouldn't talk to us, and then the 4th summer, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" I'm like, "What happened?" It's like, I guess it just takes 3 years. I didn't even know that she knew who we were.
So do you still have the Peapod?
No, we smashed it up and threw it away.
I didn't know if you sold it for $3,800.
No, yeah, that's right. We sold it. We made a tidy profit on it. No, we do have it. And it's the
Here tonight? Did you take it down?
It would be remarkable if I traveled around with it.
That would be worth the price of admission for all these people.
I was doing a Judge John Hodgman. I'm doing a Judge John Hodgman tour. In fact, we're coming here to the State Theater on November 7th, which I hope that you will come in. That's 2 days after Election Day, so you might be getting over your hangover. You might want to see a show. It could be a happy hangover. I don't know. But November 7th, State Theater, put it in your calendars. But we just did a show in Pittsburgh, and as we exited the hotel, the Wienermobile was out front. The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen it in person, but it's magical. I believe, hot dogs are not sandwiches, and they're not good for you. But that truck is amazing. So maybe I should just be traveling around in my Peapod mobile from now on. Get a car that's shaped like it, or maybe I should just, be towed around in it.
And put a sort of a judge's podium up there and a gavel. And
look at this, the local traveling regional humorist.
Speaking of Judge John Hodgman, how did you come up with that? How does somebody decide, you know what, I'm just going to go on a podcast or the radio and just adjudicate the most weird and silly arguments.
My co-host of the podcast, Jesse Thorne, actually came up with the idea. He had a podcast, does still have a comedy podcast called Jordan Jesse Go, and he asked me, do I need to get that? I'm happy to talk to whomever. No, but he had the comedy podcast. He's like, would you ever want to do, this is now 12, maybe 13 years ago. Would you ever want to do a bit where you're like a judge, like a Judge Judy type thing? I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. I love pretending I'm really smart about things. And I love telling people that they're right and wrong. The wrong part especially, that's fun. And I also wanted to get into podcasting because at the time, we're talking about 2010 or so, like it had not exploded the way it has now. In fact, I had been listening to Jesse Thorne's interview podcast, The Sound of Young America, which is now Bullseye on NPR, carried on Maine Public Radio on Friday nights. Listen to it. He's a tremendous interviewer. But podcasting was, like you say, like not everybody can just decide to go on the radio and and have a radio show now. It's like, well, no, that's wrong. Everyone can now. Everyone can decide, and often does, to just go and start a radio show now. It's an incredible time for what we used to call radio. Podcasting is an incredible medium that anyone can enter into. And for me at the time, I was working on The Daily Show, and I was doing a little bit of acting, and I was writing, but I also, I came up through book publishing. And one of the things I learned early on about book publishing is that writing books is the only form of mass media where you own your own work, you own your own copyright, unlike anything else, and I think that's really valuable. And so I always had this feeling like, well, all of this stuff could go away, this sudden, unsurprising, unexpected, weird demi-fame that I'm enjoying, making these ads and being on The Daily Show and doing these small roles in movies. It could all go away, and I own none of it. I would love for the world to be able to speak to the world as myself, not as the deranged resident expert or whatever. And maybe when it all goes away, I can still have this, and that's exactly what happened. But more to the point, it allowed me to really connect, like the show, Judge John Hodgman is ostensibly a judge show, but we have real litigants, real people call in with their disputes, both profound and ridiculous. And it's really just a chance for me to interview interesting strangers from all over the country and all over the world. And that connection with those folks has been incredibly sustaining for me creatively and personally, and I really love it, probably more than anything else I do.
Can you make any sort of general...
Hang on a second. That said, if anyone's watching on YouTube, I really want to act still. Series regular on any network show, particularly filming at Steiner Studios in Brooklyn, I will cancel the podcast immediately, if that's what it takes. I do love the podcast, but come on. Got to get health insurance here.
If you could pick any show to be on right now, what would you be on?
Any show to be on right now?
Yeah, that's big, that's hot.
I would love to be on Only Murders in the Building. It's a show that I love.
As a victim, or?
I'll take anything. I just love that show. A lot of shows. What else am I loving? The Only Murders. I feel like I know where they film. I was on a show called Up Here last year, which was great, a musical rom-com on Hulu, and it's still up there. And we filmed in the Only Murders soundstage when they weren't there. So I know where they are. I don't know why they haven't invited me. I know how to get, that's on my resume. I know how to get there. But I love that show. I really wish that they would, a lot of shows are being rebooted. The true dream for me would be if they rebooted Bored to Death from HBO with Ted Danson and Zach Galifianakis and Jason Schwartzman and a young John Hodgman rounding out the cast. But I would love, everything old is new again, so why don't they remake that?
I was going to ask if during the time that you've done the Judge John Hodgman podcast...
Oh, wait a minute, Ray, I forgot something. There was something left off my introduction, is that I co-created an animated show that is still on Hulu called Dicktown, which is I would love to make more of, too. So please watch that, even. Sorry, I had to get all my plugs out. You got to be plugging.
Do you do animation sort of in your spare time when you're not digging clams or
Well,
growing your pea pod?
to your point, I've always done a lot of different things. Even when my first job was as a literary agent, but I also wrote for magazines. Once I started writing for magazines full time, I also started doing, comedy on stage and for websites and so forth. Like I like to do a lot of different things because I'm very curious about a lot of different things, and also I'm very good at being okay at a bunch of different things, not great at being really good at one thing because of laziness primarily. But also, and I was saying this to the guy who drove me over here, who we were talking, I don't want to brag, I used a ride share to get over here. It was a Honda CRV. We started talking about Honda CRVs as a good first car for an adult daughter. Don't ask me why that came up, but, he just took me, we were just talking about his own life, and he had been in the Navy, and then he moved here from Georgia and started teaching sixth grade, and he's done a bunch of other things since, now he's a sixth grade teacher, which is great. And I was just like, yeah, when you do a lot of different things, time moves slowly. When you do one thing, it kind of goes too fast. I like to keep as much professional texture in my life because it goes fast.
At what point did you kind of know what you were going to do? Like when you were a kid, did you say, I'm going to be...
I still don't know.
Did you want to be a writer? Did you want to be a comedian? Did you want to be an actor? Did you want to be something else?
I think that, I remember wanting to be a writer or feeling a connection to writing, in seventh or eighth grade, and then comedy also at the same time. I liked to be silly. For a long time, though, I had to keep those things separate, I thought, because when I was studying fiction writing in college, no one told me this, but I thought it had to be very serious. It was actually and then when a couple of things made me realize that wasn't necessarily true. Like I would write serious short stories about people with feelings, and then I would be invited to read them out loud, and I would read them and people would be laughing. I'm like, what's happening? And gradually I came to understand, like, it was Dave Eggers, the author Dave Eggers, and I'd been writing for McSweeney's, and he's like, you have to do more of this. This is, and he said that that's your voice, And I was writing the stuff, I was writing a column called Ask a Former Professional Literary Agent, which was from the point of view of a deranged person giving advice, which is very much what I do now. And was certainly the character that I imported to The Daily Show, this deranged, sort of tweedy literary authority figure who could say whatever monstrous thing and it would be taken seriously because they were a white guy wearing a tie. Do you know what I mean? And it's a problem in our culture that still happens, And in any case, it was a joke. And I was like, I got to write more serious stuff. He's like, you need to write more comedy for us. That's the voice. And I made a good decision, which is I believed him. And it wasn't until, I was writing funny. And I was still resistant to it. But then George Saunders, the brilliant writer and very funny person, was being interviewed by Jesse Thorne. Before I started doing Judge John Hodgman, I would listen to Jesse's interview show. And he was like, I always thought that I had to be serious, and then when someone let me know that I could be funny while writing short fiction or long fiction, it felt like I had been in a boxing ring my whole life with one hand tied behind my back. And now I could really get in there and mix it up. And that was very meaningful to me.
When you look back, where do you think some of the elements of your comedy voice come from? Like as a kid, were there certain, comedians that you really took from, or not actually took their jokes, but took some of their cues from, or shows?
Did I come to Portland to get canceled? Ray, Routhier? I would say that so I was just saying I was across the street at the Green Hand bookstore before coming over here, because I'd never been in there, and it's incredible. And it was this moment of psychic connection where the only other person in the store goes to the woman who was working there going, "Do you have anything by Edward Gorey?" And Edward Gorey is, I don't know if you know who Edward Gorey is, but a profound hero of mine. You can imagine how he might have spoken across time and geography to a weird only child who had been born at the age of 42 and left to his own pretentious devices in Brookline, Massachusetts. And Edward Gorey's, like the Gashly Rumtinis, his little children's book about, 26 children who die in alphabetical order. Like that, I distinctly remember changing the way my brain is shaped and how I see and understand the world. And, I also remember in that same over-decorated room that I read Edward Gorey in, and by over-decorated, I mean as an only child, I had a lot of room. In fact, I had a suite of rooms by the time I was in high school because one of our tenants left and I took over her wing. And I told my parents, I'm in high school now, I deserve an apartment of my own. They had been renting out these 3 rooms to pay the mortgage, and I put an end to that. And I filled it up with brass lamps and ferns and leather-bound wing chairs, and I would sit there and read my Edward Gorey. I also read a book called The Laszlo Letters by Don Novello. And Don Novello is still alive, but he's more famous on early Saturday Night Live for playing Father Guido Sarducci. But one of the things he would do in his spare time was write crank letters, not even crank phone calls, crank letters to politicians and corporations. And and they would just say the most insane things like, "Hey, Richard Nixon, thumbs up to you. I love you, buddy, so much. But here's the problem." It was just, he had this kind of like, this deranged confidence as he would be writing to these companies, and then they would write back. And he would take their responses and publish them. And it was really, really funny to me. I wish I had a better example of, this is a long time ago. I wish I had memorized all of those letters so I could give you an example. And then, a lot of cartoonists. Linda Barry is very meaningful to me. Obviously, Edward Gorey is a cartoonist. Andy Kaufman was really important to me. All of the pretty much white guy nerd, touchstones, Monty Python and that kind of surrealist comedy. And Peter Cook and Dudley Moore were really important to me. And then later, when I would do comedy research, I was like, oh, yeah. Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip, I remember watching while I was painting a bedroom. And the combination of that tour de force, incredibly funny but incredibly personal comedy, and the paint fumes, really, that also reshaped my brain, I dare say.
I was going to ask a little bit more about the time that you've been doing the Judge John Hodgman podcast and whether you've sensed a change in the kinds of things people bring to you now, or the kinds of things people want you to settle.
No, it's always about washing the dishes. It's astonishing how consistent people who are married to each other, who live together, hate the way the other person washes the dishes. And it has gotten to the point that I've had to ban that as a topic, as well as loading the dishwasher. The rule is whoever loads the dishwasher is doing it the right way. If you don't load the dishwasher.
Yes.
And that is extended to a kind of settled law in the court of Judge John Hodgman, which is that if you're doing the work, you get to choose how it's done. And if you're not doing the work, and the work could be anything from driving or washing the dishes or cleaning the house or motivating people to register to vote and vote, or whatever the work is that needs to be done, working for change and social change and so forth. If you're not doing the work, you don't get to complain, except to yourself. I mean, you can call my podcast and complain, I guess. But, yeah.
Would you be willing to take a case that one of our audience members emailed us earlier today?
You mean right here live on stage?
Right here live, without any rehearsal?
No.
Okay, never mind.
Of course I will.
All right.
Of course I will.
Here's the case. I can't read it the way that Jesse Thorne would, but my husband always tops off the gas tank after the pump's automated shutoff has kicked in.
Yeah.
I have read up on this subject and shared that it's dangerous and a bad idea, but he persists. Can you please order him to stop?
Is this signed my wife? I know it says no topping off on labels on the tank, on the gas pump and everything. I always do it though. Right? Is it dangerous? Yes. Okay. Well, what's going to happen? Fire? Immediate fire? Death by fire? Is there someone who wants to raise their hand and offer me an I agree with you. I'm not going to dispute this. I know that I'm wrong. But what is going to happen? So here's the thing. I have topped off before. I'll go click. I bet I can get a little more in there. Click. And then I pull it out, and there's gas all over the place. And I'm like, well, maybe that's the problem. So then I go click, and I'm like, I'm not going to top it off. Pull it out, gas all over the place. So I haven't been able to discern the difference. And this time next week you'll be reading in the Portland Press Herald about how I immolated myself, fueling up outside of Portland. So anyway, I guess it's very dangerous, and the husband shouldn't do it. Wait a minute, what's going to happen really? All right, this guy's raising his hand.
The pump has a valve in it.
The pump has a valve in it.
When the back pressure from the gas
Yeah.
sort of comes, the tank is full, and so it acts on the pump and causes it to shut off.
Okay.
And so the difference.
But what does that mean to me? Joe Normal.
You get to feel
Johnny
a little
Gas
bit
pump.
better about yourself. I don't think you get to drive much farther.
No, I understand that it has a shutoff valve, and I understand that the amount of extra gas I'm getting in there is minimal. But what is the danger? That the gas is going to spill out and I'm going to light a cigarette to be cool and explode everything?
Probably nothing is going to happen, or there's going to be a really cool explosion.
Well.
Your fuel tank needs air because
All right, Greg.
it has to have the ability to expand due to temperature change.
Okay. This is great.
Would you like to change your ruling now?
Yeah, do what Greg says. All I needed was if they just put a thing on the label, the fuel tank needs some extra space or whatever, I'd be like, got it. I want to follow the rules. All right, I am a rule follower by nature. That was one of the areas where I would in past flout the rules and get to feel a little bit like a rebel. But now that I understand what's going on, thanks to Greg, I will change my ways forever, and so shall this husband. This is the sound of a gavel.
Speaking of rules following, you played PC, personal computer, in commercials.
That was his full name, that's right.
And the way I see it, you were the star of those commercials. They were trying to tell us that the Mac was better, but the Mac was some cool, hip young person, and you were every man. You were the person that we could all relate to. So so I guess my point is, Did it start out that way? Did you and the director and all the people at some point realize, hey, more people are going to like the PC?
You know that the ads
the
were
Mac.
for Apple computers, right?
It was supposed to be.
And it was a very successful ad campaign for Apple computers.
Okay.
So successful that they might even want to bring it back. That's not an announcement, that's a prayer. That was what they call in performance, comedy performance, a two-hander. They call it something else on the internet now, don't look it up. But it's a comedic two-hander. Like Justin Long, the human, who played the Mac, who is a young, cool guy, is really, really talented, comedically and actingly. And the truth is that, you know, the PC was supposed to be the butt of the joke, right? But, you know, we figured out between me and Justin, the writers of the ads, and Phil Morrison, the director of all of the ads, that like the way to play it is that the Mac really wants the PC to be okay. You know? Like the PC is living a life that he thinks is okay, but even he knows he's convincing him. Even he knows that it's not okay. Like, and we all, you know, like we all go through those phases in our lives where we're trying to convince ourselves we're happy, but we're not happy, you know. And that's where the PC was, you know. What made the dynamic, I think, so great and why it worked so well is not that my guy was more likable or the everyman, not to put you down, Ray. You're not wrong there. Do you know what I mean? But what I think was going on was that what we figured out, the character dynamic early on, was that the Mac feels bad for PC, and the PC feels bad for Mac. And he's like, you poor dumb hipster. Let me show you how you really dress. You know what I mean? And so they ended up having real connection and sympathy for one another. And it's true that over time, as the ad agency figured out that he could put me in more and more awkward costumes and endanger my life through more and more elaborate stunts that I had to do while Justin just stood there. It did seem like I was getting more of the whatever, but it really was the relationship between those two characters, that they both each in their own way have sympathy for the other one. And they both think they're right because in reality most people think that they're right. You know, very few people think that they're wrong. And you know the book On Being Wrong by Catherine Schultz. Did you ever read that book? It's really, really important. It came out probably 12 years ago. It was a huge book in my life. Because, you know, she pointed out this human fallacy that should be so obvious, and yet it is hard for people to understand, which is like, we all understand that people get it wrong all the time. People have wrong ideas, they have wrong plans, they make mistakes, etc. We've all felt what it's like to be wrong. But for the most part, when we have decided how we're going to do something, it never occurs to us that we're wrong as an option. Like, people don't stop enough to think, wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong. And it's something that has completely changed my worldview, because when our worldview is threatened in some way, right, it's automatically our instinct often to be like, no, to defend our position, you know. And this is why we're in this cultural mode right now, you know, because there are a lot of people between social media and podcasts and whatever, there are a lot of people who can reach audiences now who never had a platform before, people who don't look like you and me. And when people who are not white guys with glasses say, hey, you know what, maybe historically white guys with glasses haven't been the best all the time, we feel like, oh, no, but this. Instead, we should think, maybe they're right and I'm wrong. Anyway, how do we go? Oh, that's right, because the Mac and PC both thought they were right.
Well, now it's the time where we take questions from the audience. So if
Boy, really,
anybody
I
has
ended that on a bummer.
question- I think we have a microphone going on.
Oh. Oh, you have all been sitting there this whole time?
Very quietly.
I'm so sorry. Let me give you my full
You're
attention.
much better looking in person than your photograph.
I thought you were going to say, you're much better looking from the back.
When I arrived, there was a lovely young woman with a 400-pound pig walking it. We chatted for a bit.
That's more exciting than the Wienermobile.
Well, this was the problem. I thought, no, I have a ticket for tonight. I should go. So my question to you is, did I make the right decision?
See, you're putting Catherine Schultz into practice. Was I wrong? Yes.
Thank you.
You should have followed the pig. I'm coming back November 7th. You can see me. How often are you going to see, well, in Portland, you probably see that 400-pound pig all the time. I bet you. Oh, really? Is it a... I'm mad that I didn't see it. Someone's got to have the pig person's number. Let them know. All right. Did that answer your question? Does anyone have another question?
I guess we're done.
Yeah, no, I guess so, right? Okay, here in the front row. You don't have to run with the micro. Well, I mean, if you're recording, maybe you should. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a real wind-up.
I don't know that the question will be worth.
Hi,
worth
what's your
this
name?
effort.
What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm not going to reveal any of that information. Am I to understand that you grew up in Brookline, Mass, you live in Brooklyn, New York, and spend summers and other parts of the year in Brooklyn, Maine? And if that's true, is there any significance to that?
I am from Brookline, Massachusetts. I live in Brooklyn, New York. As far as where I live in Maine, it's none of your goddamn business. So I don't see where there's a trend there for me to even comment. Oh, another question from the person next to you.
Yeah,
Hello, what is your name?
Theo.
Theo?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to know.
I'm John.
Hi, John.
Nice to see
I
you.
wanted to know if you enjoyed the Peapod. Did you ever take the boat out?
Not once.
No? I mean, does it do the thing where it's supposed to be, good?
I don't even know if it floats. Yes. Yes, we took, oh, there's another in the front row here. Yeah. I'll answer your question, but aren't you the person who came from up there and went to the front row center?
I did,
You are,
in fact.
you are grabbing life by the horns today.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Let me answer this question and then, so, yes, the Peapod is, it's one of our most favorite things because it literally gave us a completely different perspective on life in this town and in Maine, because we're now seeing it from the water. And yes, it's I don't know what else to say, yeah.
So it does, because it's pointed on both sides, it does do the current well, and it's
Yeah,
stable.
you can go this way, you can turn around and go this way. I don't want to blow your mind, I've even gone side to side. It's terrific. I can stand up in it, it's basically a paddleboard. Yes, sorry, what is your name?
I'm Tricia, I'm calling from the front row.
Hi, Tricia. I love that neighborhood. What's going on?
I just want to say how much I loved reading Vacation Land very recently.
Thank you.
In fact, it happens. And and as a member of One Longfellow Square, I'll put that out there too, hooray, for this place. But I wanted to say how much I really
This is a lovely
enjoyed
space, by the way. I've never been here before. I love it.
Portland's living room.
Yeah, I love it.
I loved the spirit of humility that you brought. I didn't know the Catherine Schultz part. If it's in Vacationland, I managed to miss that. But I love the spirit of humility you bring to that story, the where I don't live in Maine story. All the pieces in that book were really lovely and really made me think of you and see you in a lovely new light, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's very kind. And thank you, One Longfellow Square, for this lovely new light. Dumb.
Hi, John. Also calling from the front row.
Wow, it's quite a night for the front row. What's your name?
I'm Tim.
Hi, Tim.
I write about advertising for a living.
Terrific.
And I did a podcast a few years ago, about an hour-and-a-half podcast about the Get a Mac campaign.
Was I on it?
You were not on it, except a little clip from when you were on Justin's podcast.
Oh, yeah, I was on his podcast.
But I did speak with Phil for a couple hours.
I'm not that
and
busy.
It was, you were, I think you were busy. You were
busy.
Well, when did you do the podcast?
This was 2021-ish.
Yeah, I might have been a little busier then.
Anyway, it turned out great.
You spoke to Phil Morrison about it.
I did speak to
Great.
Phil about it, but I'm just curious your opinion on the 66 that aired were beloved, and I think you shot, 200 more that didn't air, something like that?
Something like that. It was about we aired about a third of the ones that we shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can get our hands on those?
Yeah, I have bootlegs in the back of my car.
Exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. That's all I do. I go from town to town selling thumb drives of unaired Mac versus PC ads.
I would pay dear good money for those.
And the thumb drives are blank, of course, because I don't have that stuff. And then I just get out of town. That's my new career.
John, while the mic's running, I don't want to be that video guy from Side Stage, but I'm going to be because nobody's asking the question.
Oh, I thought maybe my microphone was wrong.
Do you use a Mac or a PC?
A Mac. I mean, there was maybe a couple of years when I was in the wilderness where I had like a gateway in the 90s because my office, when I was working at the literary agency, they did. But, I talked my dad into getting the very first Macintosh computer. What I used, I had a Mac 128K, a 256K, an SE, a PowerBook 145B, and then I was in the wilderness for a while, and then I came back just before the ad started, actually. But everything that I've ever created that of any meaning, other than children, has been on a Mac computer. I had the pleasure of writing that in an email to Steve Jobs. One day I got an email from Steve Jobs right after the first ads ran. And I was like, he said, "Thank you for your work." And I'm like, is this a gag? I had to go to someone in corporate and be like, what's this? S. Jobs at Apple. I mean, it was like something like sjobs@apple.com or whatever. I'm like, no, sometimes he just writes emails. So, and then I started going on The Daily Show, and the ads were very big at the time. And in 2007, I was in a story conference with Jon Stewart, and he said, "Oh, hey, by the way, guess who's coming around next week? Steve Jobs." And I'm like, "What, is he going to be on the show?" He's like, no, he's just coming by to show us all the iPhone. The iPhone was just being released. And he just wanted to come by The Daily Show and show it. I'm like, okay, great. And he said, "Yeah, you should come by and meet him." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, he's coming to see you, Jon Stewart," is my feeling, right? And I'm like, if he wants to meet me, he knows how to. And very much part of my consideration here was I don't want to annoy Steve Jobs. I love this job so much. I don't want to get on his back. I don't want to surprise him. I don't want to be I don't want to be in a meeting with Jon Stewart And he's like, that's why he's there. And all of a sudden I'm poking him going, hello, it's me. Mind if I come in? And John's like, no. It'll be great. You should definitely come by. I said, well, you know what? I'm not sure, but I'll let you know. And I thought about it over the weekend. And I really decided, like, I don't want to mess with anything. I don't want to take any liberties. This guy has completely changed my life. I'm in awe of him, both John and Steve Jobs. Like, I don't want to get in the middle of that. And I'm explaining this to a guy that I was having dinner with on that Monday night. I was like, yeah, Steve Jobs was in the office, and I decided that I wouldn't go in. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I guess I understand that. And it's when I was explaining it to him that I realized that I never told The Daily Show that I wasn't coming in. And I was like, well, they probably didn't even notice. Like, I didn't promise that I was coming in. So I get home and I call Jen Flans, the now executive producer of the show. I'm like, hey, Jen. She's like, where were you? I'm like, what? She goes, we were paging you for 15 minutes.
Oh, man.
They thought, and I was like, oh, no. And, I was like, I felt really, really bad about it. And especially since part of the thinking that I had was that, I'm not going to, if Steve Jobs wants to meet me, he can reach out to me. He knows, if he wants to, he knows how to reach me. I don't want to impose on him, and there will be plenty more times that I'll get to meet Steve Jobs because we're all going to live forever. But obviously it didn't turn out that way. So that's why it's a good thing. If someone says, come sit in the front row, just sit in the front row. That chair's not going to be there forever. I'm taking it home with me. I get it for free. That's my
I see
payment.
some hands in the back there.
Okay, there's some
One
hands
here,
back
too.
there, and then
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
We talked about gas
Jo-
pumps
Johnny Gas
earlier.
Pump Explainer,
Yeah, this is
yeah.
Max from the second row.
Hey, Max, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
My wife, who is a whole human being in her own right, is an English teacher, and we
Great.
read Moby Dick recently. Had a question
Oh,
about Moby
great.
Dick.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you think Moby Dick is secretly like a great piece of comedy writing.
It's hilarious.
Right, thank you. Because he takes a break in the middle to just list whales.
I had never read Moby Dick before, and like, I don't know how, it's a classic, obviously, but it is, like, it's so funny. It's so funny. And, sorry, let me reset here. Moby Dick is a novel, if you didn't know. And I just read Middlemarch earlier this year, which is also really funny. And I was like, I want to read another big, thick book that I should have read a long time ago. Moby Dick was just sitting there, and I started reading it. I was like, this is hilarious. And you may not know that it's hilarious until you hear it being read by me in a bad Burton I. Maine accent. Which you can do if you subscribe to my Substack, hodgman.substack.com. I'm reading it chapter by chapter in a phony Maine accent. And but it's really quite funny. It's really quite good. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi, John. I'm way in the back here.
Oh, it's the ghost of One Longfellow Square.
John, this is one long. No, I'm not gonna do that. Hi.
Who is it?
I'm on the floor. I'm Loretta.
Hi, Loretta. How are you?
I'm good. So speaking of your Substack, I heard through the grapevine you were reading Dune in a Maine accent. Is that true, or is it just Moby Dick, or is it?
No. So.
And the reason I'm asking, I happen to have an excerpt on my phone of the Fear is the Mind Killer monologue from Dune. I just wondered if you
Oh,
might.
the litany against fear.
Yeah, like maybe read it for us in your Maine accent.
Well,
As a plug for your Substack. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like this. So I did read one chapter of Dune in my terrible Maine accent. And then I moved on to Moby Dick. I didn't get to the litany against fear. And I don't have it with me. Can you, let me. Are you Loretta or yeah. Yeah, definitely give me your telephone. Do you all know the litany against fear from Dune? So it's in Dune. There is a meditative. What would you call it? It's not a chant. It's a recitation. Mantra, sure. It's a way that the main character is trained to calm himself when feeling anxiety. And honestly, it's called the Litany Against Fear, and it's been profoundly meaningful since I read it as a kid. Like, I would recite this to myself before high school tests and stuff. So let me give it to you straight, because it's very quick. The way it goes is, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I think it's really meaningful. And, like we had, for various reasons, did some dialectical behavioral therapy in our family recently, which is all about taking emotion as information, and rather than let it settle in you and drive you bananas, to surf it, to let it pass through you, to feel the emotion, and then when it is gone, to turn, only you remain. I think it was very, very powerful for me, and I think it really brings a lot of weight and gravity to a science fiction story that is otherwise about giant worms that eat sand and shit hallucinogenic drugs. I've wanted to memorize it my whole life. I've never managed to do it, so luckily Loretta has her phone here. And now, to get into my Maine accent, I have to do a little Bert. Bert and I went down to the dock about 5 a.m. to start up the Bluebird. Bert went into the shed to get the slickers. I got into the cockpit to start up the Bluebird. I advanced the choke. All right, that's good enough. You all know what Bert and I is, right? I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I'll face my fear, permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Sour. That were the fear. Where the fear went, there's nothing. Only I will remain. Thank you. What a wonderful challenge. What a mashup.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you especially to John Hodgman.
So, thank you. Let me just say, if you're not a subscriber to the Portland Press Herald, what's wrong with you? Obviously, you need to support local journalism, especially in an election year. And if you're not doing the work, you don't get to decide. So do the work, and then, also, my books are out there. They're for sale. I'll be at the State Theater on November 7th. We're going to have a good time there. Joel Mann's going to come down and throw down some bass with Night and Day Trio. And Dicktown's still on Hulu. And Hodgman.substack.com. And that's all my plugs. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, John.
What a pleasure.